My name is Laura Appleton, and I'm the Vice Principal at our Invictus Sentosa campus. So thank you everyone for joining our Free Parents Talk, helping your child build their literacy skills. Throughout this talk, I hope that I can answer the following questions. What are early literacy skills? What is phonics? What are tricky words? And how can I help my child to read at home? These are a lot of things that come up in the first couple years of primary school. And so hopefully you'll just learn some things today that will be helpful for you and your early reading child. Just a quick background about myself. I'm an American living in Singapore. I started with Invictus teaching at the Dempsey Hill campus and then moved over to the Sentosa campus this past year. Before that, I have had the chance to teach in several places around the world, including South Korea, Belgium, and England, both in state schools and in private schools. And throughout my career, I've really focused on the early primary years and English language instruction. So I've worked a lot with literacy skills. So what are early literacy skills? They start from as early as 2 years old, when our children stop chewing on books and start actually looking at the books, flipping through the pages, and recognizing that within the book there are letters that tell us things and that books tell us stories. And they start connecting letters to sounds and sounds to words. And then they start recognizing letters. They know their name begins with the letter D, so then they start recognizing the letter D all around them and they start pointing it out to you. Then they start to notice words that rhyme or begin with the same sound. And all these things are those early literacy building blocks that are developing between 2 and 3 years old. And then as parents, we think, I want to start encouraging my child to read. So how can I make that happen? Well, we can teach them their letters. I can teach them the alphabet sounds, and then we can just push those sounds together into words, and then we can help our child read. But what I hope to highlight today is just how complex learning to read actually is, and all the functions that have to come together to create a successful reader. And one of the things I want to highlight to you is this very last point here on early literacy skills. And that doesn't have to do with letters or letter sounds, but it has to do with vocabulary. And when a child starts to use and understand a more varied vocabulary, and we'll see how much that is also tied into reading and those literacy skills. So we have here the simple view of reading, and this was developed by Goff and Tumner in the mid-'80s. And since then, it has become an internationally recognized formula or process for reading comprehension. So when I'm talking about reading and helping your child to read, I'm really talking about not just looking at words and saying words on a page, but I'm talking about reading comprehension, because that really is the end goal for reading. We read to understand, we read to learn. So when we're talking about reading, it really is including reading comprehension. So in this simple view of reading, it's broken down as a formula. So that has the two components that are the product is reading comprehension. So we have word recognition processes and then language comprehension processes. So we need both to get good reading. And so we can just see on the grid here, we want to end up in this top right where we have good language comprehension, good word recognition, and that's going to give us good reading. But if one of the other parts is missing, it's going to affect our overall reading ability. So if you're a visual learner, this graph is quite good, or we can think of it as a formula. So we also have here Scarborough's rope, and this goes a little bit further into the simple view of reading. And what I like about this is it breaks down for us exactly what do we mean by word comprehension, what do we mean by language comprehension. When we look down here at the bottom part, we can see there are 3 strands to word comprehension. We have the phonological awareness, so when we're just thinking about letters and sounds. And then we have what's called decoding, and this is when children can start putting those sounds together and turning them into words. And then we just have sight recognition, where we have really common words that we see over and over again, and we can read them just by looking at them. and not having to put the sounds together. So if we have all three of those together, working really well together, then we have good word recognition. Then you can see an even larger part of this rope is the language comprehension, which includes the background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. So I know a lot of people think, and even, we think language comprehension, we think vocabulary, but it goes so much beyond that. And I also want to highlight, when we say language comprehension, we are also not connecting this to English language learners, but native English speakers, all of this is still very important. So just because you're a native English speaker doesn't necessarily mean your language comprehension skills are going to be as good as they could be. So now we've got this rope, and we can see how all these strands, they all really build and intertwine with each other to create good text comprehension. So I'm going to now look first at word recognition and phonics, and then we'll talk a little bit more about language comprehension. So what is phonics? Well, phonics is a method of teaching reading. And it is a very widely accepted method of teaching reading. And we do that by learning the 44 sounds in the English language and then their corresponding letter combinations. So we call them phonemes and graphemes, but technical language. So we'll just talk about sounds and letters. It's generally accepted that around 40 to 44 sounds, depends what your English accent is, which country you're coming from. But for Invictus, we teach the Jolly Phonics system, which is a British phonics system. And there, in British English, we say we have 44. And we can see here, Jolly Phonics system breaks those 44 sounds into 7 sets. And so we can see the corresponding letter combinations that make those sounds. We can see them in that white square there. So obviously there are more letter combinations. So we might learn the long A sound, but we know there are 4, 5 different ways we can spell the A sound: A-I, A-Y, E-I-G-H, A, magic E. So with phonics, it's broken down. And with synthetic phonics, which is what British phonics is, they're taught in a specific non-alphabetic order from simple to complex. So group 1, it starts simple through to group 7. And once we know those letter combinations, then we move on to the more complex alternative spelling. So I know I went through that really, really quickly, but I'll explain a little bit more detail on the next slide. So with phonics, with synthetic phonics, we're learning these sounds from simple to complex. And then the children learn to decode these letters into sounds, and then they blend those sounds back into words. So they look at a word, then they recognize which sounds are in the word, and then they push the sounds together. And then children also have to learn tricky words, and those are words which are not phonetically possible to sound out. And those words are introduced, again, systematically, and we memorize those because we can't use decoding skills to read them. Through the Jolly Phonics system, it's very broken down and structured process for learning. So one of my biggest recommendations that I, as a teacher, say to parents and encourage to parents is, if you want to help your child read at home, learn phonics yourself. So if you're an Invictus and your child is learning Jolly Phonics, then follow along the Jolly Phonics program with them and learn those letter sounds, learn those corresponding letter combinations, because that's how your child is being taught to read and write. So if you know those letter combinations for the sounds, then you can read with and guide your child the way they're being taught at school. So I think I'll just do a couple examples here. When you're learning your letter sounds, one very, very common mistake that is really easy to make is adding an at the end of your letter sounds. So for example, the first group of letters we teach children are S-A-T-I-P-N. And these are simple sounds to learn, and they can start putting words together right away. And it's really easy to say the letter sounds as S, A, T, I, P, N. So we're adding this at the end of words, which is not what we call the pure letter sound. So, and it makes it harder for children to blend those letters together if they're putting that extra at the end. So for example, we have the word pin. And if I have this extra sound, pa-ina, 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 and the child thinking pa-ina, I don't know any words that sound like pa-ina. and it makes it much harder to blend those sounds together. But if we learn the pure sound, then it's much easier to hear pin. We can hear the word much easier. So we really encourage parents not only when to just learn the letter combinations, but really learn how to properly pronounce the letter sounds and not put the extra us at the end. When we're moving on, we learn group 1, group 2, group 3. When we get into the higher groups, we start learning the 2 letters coming together to make one sound. So they're called digraph, and 3 letters together are called trigraph. And we teach those terms to the children because they learn that di means 2. So they know that it has 2 letters together, and tri means 3. So they learn that when they see these 2 letters together, it's not I, but a. It's not a, but o, I, e, o. So they learn these graphemes together as one sound. So then when they're reading a word, they don't have to sound it out, sa-ap. Sa-ap. Well, it's going to be really hard for an early reader to get from sa-ap to soap. So they learned that the OA together is O. So soap, soap, soap. Okay, I know that word. And again, another example, ra'in, itten, ra'in. Well, again, that's really hard, but rain, rain, rain. So you can really see how much sense learning our letter sounds in this way makes, and how important it can be for parents to learn them as well. So when you're reading with your child, you can put them together. This gentleman down here at the bottom of the screen, his name is Mr. Thorne, and I recommend him to all my parents if they want to learn phonics at home through YouTube. Mr. Thorne Does Phonics is brilliant. I have no affiliation with Mr. Thorne, but I think he's amazing, and his Geraldine Giraffe puppet. And on YouTube, you can see his alphabet series, and you can learn the letter sounds right along with your kids on YouTube. So that's my big sell for phonics and for parents getting on board and learning those 44 sounds. Now let's talk about language comprehension and how that includes background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. So how can I improve that? I have here in yellow conversations and reading together. So this is the number one way that you can improve your child's vocabulary, but also their language structures, their verbal reasoning, is to have those conversations one-to-one with the screens off, with the TV off. I know during the circuit breaker recently, I've actually had the opportunity to go on more walks with my own son and getting to have some uninterrupted conversation time with him just when we're outside on a walk together. And if we think about our young children, our 4, 5, 6-year-old children, how often do they get to have an uninterrupted conversation with an adult when they're at school? Not very often, because they're in a classroom with 20 other children. So that, they'll have short exchanges, but a longer 15, 20-minute uninterrupted conversation with an adult is hard to get at school. So they need to get that from us parents at home. And when we're having those conversations, they're expanding their vocabulary because they're listening to us and we're modeling good vocabulary and good sentence structure and good grammar. Then also I have reading together. So when your child gets to be 4, 5, 6 years old, they can become active participants in your story time. So not just having your child read a phonic reader to you, but to keep those bigger picture books, bigger story books. 6, 7 years old might even be ready for like a very basic chapter book to be read to them, but that it's an active reading conversation. So they're allowed to interrupt you during the story. They're allowed to ask you questions during the story, to look at the pictures together, and just to stop and talk whatever comes to their mind while you're reading together. And that is really going to help their language comprehension. Then I have down here new experiences. It's really important for children to be able to connect what they're reading to their own lives and to their own feelings. And new experiences are also going to build up that background knowledge for them. So if you are having the chance to spend more time in the kitchen with your children during the circuit breaker, doing some baking and stuff like that. They're experiencing all these new things, this new vocabulary. They're going to be able to, when they read a book that's talking about cooking or has that kind of vocabulary in it, they're going to be able to go back and connect it to their own experiences in their own life. So just introducing your child to new things and including them in learning new things with you. So maybe you're fixing something in your house, and it can be kind of hard sometimes when children are kind of underfoot, but just including them in the conversation, talking to them about what you're doing, getting out the ladder to change a light bulb or something like that. And it's all just adding up to their background knowledge in their head, which is going to help their language comprehension. So I know I've talked about a lot of stuff and I've talked about it really quickly, but I'm a person who learns by seeing examples. So I have a couple videos here of reading with a emerging reader. My son happens to be 5.5 and he's learning to read. So I've made a couple videos with him at home and some things that happen that come up while we're reading together, and what we can do just to help while we're reading together with our child, and some common things that might come up and how we can deal with them. So we'll just start this first video. Okay.
Bob Bug.
Yeah.
Bob Bug has a big bang.
Close, but it's not pan. That's right, because it's a hanging down pan.
I thought pans are flat in the handle.
That's a frying pan.
Frying pan?
Frying pans are big and flat. This can be a pan, or sometimes we can call it a pot.
A ginormous pot?
Yeah, an enormous pot. Okay, so Bob Bug has a big pan. I'm just going to stop there. So we can see, it's taken, 47 seconds to read 6 words. So it's slow like that at the beginning, and that's okay. When he got to the word has, he misread it. Sometimes it's really common for children to just kind of give a guess. And we never want to encourage guessing with words. We always want to encourage decoding, breaking the word into sounds. So instead of just correcting him and saying no, it's has, I just said, and where I have the cursor under the word, that my finger would be there normally. So I'm just redirecting him and I'm saying the first sound, and that's giving him a clue. Okay, I need to go back and just recheck that word. And then the same thing when he got to pan, he misread it, and then I didn't even have to really do anything, but then he was able to correct himself. So make sure you're giving your child enough time to self-correct. Don't just jump in there and correct them right away. Normally they do have the skill to read it. They just need a little bit of time to process. What about this word here?
And lots of
Tins, that's right. Remember, let's not guess at words. Let's use our sounds, okay?
Cans are something that you drink from?
No, this can also be called a can, but it's going to be but here we have tins. So we want to make sure we're reading the words, not just guessing, right? Tins. Bob Bug has a big pan and lots of tins. What's Bob doing now?
Bob cuts up lots. Bob cuts up a cookie.
Okay, and there it was. Oh, I didn't mean to change slide, but there he was. Again, he made a guess. He didn't read bun. He looked at the picture and he saw what he thought looked like a cookie. And this is a really common thing. And we, again, just really, really want to reinforce, don't guess. Don't look at the pictures and have a guess. We really want to encourage using our sounds when we're reading. I also think a little bit later in that video, there is this mini meltdown from him. And he just says, oh, I can't do it. I can't, it's taking too long. So in that instance, I don't want to escalate the situation, so I just say, okay, should I read it to you? And then, or we can read it together. So immediately, if the child's feeling pressure, give them a bit of breathing space. You read the next page to them. Help diffuse the situation, because we want to keep it a positive experience. Lots of praise, lots of encouragement. We don't want any kind of stress associated to the reading process. In this next video, I'm just going to highlight how you can start to bring in learning about punctuation, which is also an important part of early reading skills. So I'm just going to highlight some punctuation here to Thomas and how I do that. Oh, sorry, let me just go back a slide.
Bug says yuck.
Good, and what is this? What is this mark right here? The line with the dot.
That is, you can say it loudly.
Right, what do you remember what it's called?
Exclamation.
Yeah, an exclamation mark or an exclamation point. And it tells us to read it like...
loudly or...
exclaim it, right?
yeah.
Can you do it? Can you say that using the exclamation mark to help your...
That bug says yuck. Mom bug says yuck.
Good expression. Yuck. How do you say yuck when you're saying it? How do you say yuck?
Mommy.
Yeah, how do you say yuck? When you're saying yuck, how does your face go? How does your voice go? Yuck! So don't be afraid to have a little bit of fun with it. Start introducing the punctuation. Don't point it out on every single page. Once a book is enough, and then they slowly start to pick it up. But don't be afraid to mess around, to joke a little bit and make it fun, to encourage that kind of good association with reading. I do have here at the end of the book, I've asked Thomas to recall from the story all the different foods that the bug put in his pot. And he was having trouble with the actual vocabulary, because some of the food that the Bob puts in his pot is not food that we normally have in the house. Sorry, if I can't get it this time, I'll leave it.
Bug says yuck.
Good, and what is this? The pages, if you can't remember, and look at the pictures to help you. What did he put right here? What are those?
That's fortune.
Fig.
Fig.
Fig, and this?
Melon.
And this yellow one?
Melon.
No, this is the watermelon here. What's this? Do you remember what it's called?
Both of them rhyme and I got too confused.
They got confused. Melon and
Lemon.
lemon, that's right. Well done, Thomas. Okay, so that kind of thing might come up, and it goes along with that language comprehension. And we might think, of course my child knows the difference between a lemon and a watermelon, but they're processing a lot when they're reading words and they're looking at the pictures, and then lemon and melon, they sound similar. And I mean, we're not a house that has lemons in it very often. We're more of a lime family, so he's not coming across lemons on a regular basis. So again, it's all these little things that can add up to helping or hindering a child's reading comprehension. So just making sure it's all these little things that when you're reading with your child, asking these questions, and if it's vocabulary you think they might not be familiar with, just bring it to their attention and making it part of your conversation about the story. And then the other point I made about language comprehension is not just having your child read to you, but shared reading. And on this last video, we're reading a more complex text, and we're going to kind of read it together. He can read words that he knows, and I'll read the other text. And it's also a non-fiction text, which I also highly recommend doing joined reading together with non-fiction text. And what's this a picture of?
Lake.
Close. It's a can you read the word with? River. Let's read the word together.
Mommy, is a lake a circle that can go around the city?
A lake is just, like a one spot of water that stays within that hole. Lake is like water in a big hole. And a river is moving.
Is moving?
Moving from one place into another place. So let's practice reading this word. Are you ready?
The river moves to the sea.
Yeah. Ready? Read it with me. R, I,
river.
R, I,
River.
River. And rush toward the sea.
Rush toward the sea.
Okay, so there you can kind of see how we shared reading of that page, but that also, if children are given that kind of space to ask questions and talk during story time, lots of questions can come up, lots of ways for them to build their vocabulary and build their background knowledge and comprehension while they're reading. You might think, oh, we've got this short little book and you can be sat there for 25 minutes. So if you can give that time a couple times a week, 2-3 times a week to your child, that will be really, really beneficial. So just some strategies for reading with your child at home. Allow time to look at the pictures and to discuss the story. So you saw a little bit of that during those videos. Help your child with decoding before giving the whole word. And again, that is having that background phonic knowledge as a parent to be successful and help them with the decoding. Always encourage decoding, not guessing. Encourage using pictures to understand new vocabulary and to make predictions or inferences about what's going to happen next in the story. So before you turn the page, you can ask them what you think is going to happen or how the story is going to end. Ask questions that help your child to make connections to their own experiences. Shared reading introduces more complex text. If it turns into a battle, stop. Before you stop completely, always offer to read to them, or to you read a page, they read a page kind of thing. Make a couple offerings before you stop it completely, and usually they'll agree to one of them. It's just as beneficial to read to your child. Keep a mix of physical and digital books. Don't discount digital books. There are some amazing apps out there that you can use, and I encourage a combination of the both. We use a combination of the both at Invictus, so you can use a combination of both at home. And then lastly, be an example. Let your child see you read. I like to read fiction for pleasure, and I kind of get some reading time integrated into our family time. We can have 20 minutes after dinner where I get to get out my book and the boys get their stack of books, and we just have 15 minutes of quiet reading time. Everyone in the family sits down with a book. Usually I don't get much time reading my book because I get asked to read their books, but it's just a good kind of after dinner, before bed routine. But always make sure you have your book too, so that they can kind of see that that's part of your routine as well. So that ends my literacy webinar. I hope it was useful for you. And if you have any questions about any of the points that I made, please put them in the chat. Just while you might be typing any questions, I do just want to mention my campus at Sentosa, the Invictus campus at Sentosa. You can see we're here at the Star. We're here in Quayside Isle, this lovely location down at the end of Quayside Isle by the W Hotel in the marina here. And our classrooms have this lovely view of the marina. And there's some of our lovely students in the front entrance to our school. So if you have any questions, if we have any potential Invictus parents joining us tonight, please do contact us. We are a through school, not at Sentosa, but within Singapore ourselves. We are a through school at Invictus from grade 1 all the way to the end of secondary school. So if you want to get in contact with us about taking a virtual tour of our school, please get in contact with us and we'll be in touch personally. But if you have any questions about our literacy webinar, I'd love to take some time to answer them.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Laura. Great
Thank
talk.
you.
So can we encourage all the parents out here, if you like to ask a question, please feel free to actually raise your hand, and we'll actually call on you and you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Oh yes, that would be great. I would love to hear people
Yes.
directly.
Are there any questions? Yes, Sophia, can you unmute yourself?
Hi.
Hi, Sophia.
Hi. You mentioned if it's a battle to kind of stop and you read.
Yes.
At what point, though, maybe even before that, let's say you are and they're just not interested, like how long should these increments of like maybe sitting down and reading to them, and then maybe they have their like meltdown, so then you read, but they're still not, like, should it be like 20 minutes that you're like, because like you said, it takes like, you know, it can take a few minutes to read one sentence.
Yes. I think it's not always important to finish a book. So if you're doing a leveled reader with a young, an emerging reader, and like we say, we can spend 5 minutes on 12 words. If you don't finish the book, that's okay. Because what's important is they're getting some practice with those decoding skills. And if it's taken a while to get through a couple pages, but they've gotten some genuine practice, then, and you can see they're getting tired, then that's okay. Say, great, we've done half the book. Fantastic. You're doing super. We're going to finish the book again tomorrow. So just if there is just no getting them to practice decoding at all, sometimes a good strategy is to read it yourself and just read it wrong, and then they get annoyed with you, and then because you're getting all your letter sounds wrong, and then they'll correct you. So finding what works with your child. I have also had my child leave the room, so then I continued to sit on the bed and read in the most fantastic, enthusiastic way the book to myself in an empty room, and then slowly after a couple of minutes the child creeps back in to see what on earth is going on because you're reading so loudly and enthusiastically to yourself. So try a couple different strategies, but again, if it doesn't happen every night, that's okay. I think if you're getting some genuine reading experiences 3 times a week, that's okay too. So yeah.
Thank you.
And if it dissolves into tears, if you're crying, if they're crying, just stop it and come back to it the next day.
On the verge, almost.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sophia. For the next question, yes, James, we do see your hand. Please go ahead.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Right. And I've got something wrong with my camera, so it's not really just dark red.
Don't worry about it.
So we've got a 7-year-old first grader that can read, but ultimately is choosing not to and won't. And I'm trying to get to that point where, I don't want to give her something too easy, because then it's just, it's not worth it for her, for me. But, then again, I don't want to go overboard to push her further away. Because like I said, her sister has some learning disabilities and 6 years older than she, but, she does not show any signs of dyslexia or anything like that at all. So I'm just curious, how can I was never much of a reader myself, but I mean, how do you get someone to read that can read but won't,
I think then you have a difficult task of finding some texts that are interesting, that will hopefully be interesting enough to encourage the reading. Right now, I know this is not possible because we're in circuit breaker, but in this situation, I would encourage going to the library, because obviously we don't want to spend a lot of money on books, and books are expensive in Singapore. So going to the library, getting the child their own library card, and just letting them pick out any book they want. So it might be a book that you definitely know they cannot read independently, but maybe the pictures or something about the cover sparked their interest. And letting them, bring 10, 12 books home with them. And even if it just starts out where they're just kind of like looking at them, or they want you to read them to them. But if you can find through that process 1 or 2 authors that strike something, or illustrators even, that strike something with the child, and they want to go back to that same book over and over again, or that same author and over again, then that might be your in to sparking some interest. Again, there's a fine balance. I think you do need children to practice reading so that they can learn to read. Then again, you don't want to make it such a negative experience that they just shut off completely, which some children can do. So yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice for you is to kind of take the time to figure out if you can find one particular style of book or author they enjoy. A good start might be comics or graphic books might be a way in. And so they're just reading speech bubbles at first, but, they can get more complex.
Yeah, no, and, it started, we used to do some of the reading in the morning, just a quick starter, but then that had to be where that was pointless, especially during this homeschooling aspect, because then she would shut down for the next hour and a half, and there goes 10:30, we don't get started until 10:30. And so, it's crazy. I mean, I've kind of laxed over the I should say months, over the weeks, over the months. Yeah, definitely reading is in the late afternoon, evening time after school's done. And we do as you stated earlier in your presentation, where either reading together, or I'll read a page, she'll read the next page, or we'll do that shared reading together.
And that's okay. That is helpful. So it's not letting, they're still sitting there, they're still looking at the words, they're still, so don't discount that kind of strategy at the moment.
Most definitely. And sometimes I'll skip a word on purpose, and she'll say, well, what about if or said or this, or you missed that, or whatever. Right. So I mean, she is we're not laying in bed, it's not before bedtime. So I mean, the lights are on, and she can read it, she's not just listening. So yeah,
good. I think
understand though. Yeah,
stay strong.
Find something. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to move on to the question that Valentina asks. Valentina says, hi, Laura, just a question. Can you give a tip in order to help kids in reading long and complex words?
Well, that goes down, I think, to one, parents having that phonic background knowledge themselves, because then they will, as a parent, you'll be able to recognize the graphemes, the letter combinations within the word that make the sound. And then I always encourage covering up parts of the word. So they can block out the second half of the word with their thumb and focus on the first part, get those first 2 or 3 sounds, and then block the first part out and get the second part. And then let them, that way their eyes can, sometimes they see a long word and it's too much for them to process. So they can just physically block it out with their thumb and just break it apart. But again, if you have that phonic background knowledge, you're able to yourself recognize the parts of the word as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. Can I encourage the rest of the parents to also ask questions? Yes, Trisha, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there.
Hi.
Earlier you were just speaking about making predictions and inferences, and our daughter knows everything that's going to happen in every book in our house, and because of the circuit breaker now, we haven't been visiting the library as much. I was wondering, you mentioned online books. We don't have any digital books at all because she doesn't really use an iPad or anything. So we're going to get into that now. Do you have any recommendations about where to look? I just wouldn't even know where to start.
Yes, I do. So first off, Oxford, the Oxford Reading Tree leveled readers. We use the Oxford Reading Tree level readers at Invictus, and they're a British group of books that progress first phonetically and then increase with each level in their difficulty. But they do have a collection of free Oxford Reading Tree readers online. So if you go to their Oxford Owl website, and just create a login as a parent, and then there's a whole collection of leveled readers there for you for free. Another great website is called Epic, and I think they are currently doing a promotion during the circuit breaker time. Epic Book it's an American-based site, so there's probably more American children authors there, but also a really, really great selection of fiction, non-fiction, classic children's books, as well as some fun, if you have slightly older children, some really fun how-to videos, folding origami, building different Lego structures, little craft videos, as well as online books. There is another one that actually one of my students told me about just this week that she said she has been really enjoying. The question is, it is called, I don't know because I can't find the page. Another one that is also really good is called Book, which is where they've taken the books and they've animated them, and they have some really popular stories on there as well. Books with a B. So those are
Laura, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Really helpful.
Oh, sorry, I just found it. The other one was Bookful, F-U-L, Bookful. Okay. Can I call it? I can see Anne's raising her hand.
Yes, that's right.
Hi, Anne.
Hi. Sorry, I just wanted to say as well that if you're a member of the library here, you can actually download ebooks onto your iPad or onto your... So, yeah, we've been doing that. That's been really handy, just to let everyone know in case they didn't know that.
Thank you so much, Anne. Yes.
All right. Thank you for a lovely talk.
Thank you. But yes, very great recommendation.
Okay. If everyone can look at the chat, I think there's some very good selections over there by Edmund. Thank you, Edmund.
Can I see the chat? How do I see the chat, Alex?
You have to go to I think you have to exit your full screen, and then your chat group will just pop out.
There.
Okay.
Actually, these are the ones that Laura recommended.
I can't see my chat function. I'm really sorry.
No worries. I'm watching it for you. It's all good. Yeah.
Basically, what I did was, Laura, I just shared the books the sites that you recommended: Epic Books, Oxford,
okay. I
and
found it.
Bookful, and just now Anne mentioned NLB.
Yes.
NLB for the ebooks. So these they actually provide during this period. Some of them have free access, and NLB has an excellent range also of books, comics, magazines, and newspapers.
Okay, thank you for that.
So just also to add, I think Laura has very nice baking videos also. She talked about new experiences, so I actually enjoy watching her baking video. So you can try it out with your children too. It's good fun, and it's delicious and tasty also. The power
Yes,
balls.
you can find me on YouTube, Mrs. Appleton's baking. That's true. Thank you, Edmund.
Is there any more questions from the parents before we close the session? Please feel free to ask any questions that you may have. No. Well, thank you so much, parents. So thank you for your time tonight, and we wish you a very lovely evening. Thank you so much.